Alright, so we do have a couple of spoiler questions for you now. If you haven't read Fair Game yet, please go support the novel. But while we're here, let's pick into it a little bit deeper with what we have. I did speak earlier how I wasn't expecting Vlad to return so soon in the first novel, and I certainly wasn't expecting Phantom's storyline to get followed up this soon either. And you made a fascinating choice to rework his character as more of like a younger delinquent versus the original suave adult antagonist. What was your motivation behind this decision, and will we see his storyline continue in book 3?
You know, the funny thing is, I feel like the graphic novels are a bit antithetical to the structure we had in the original show, where it was an episodic monster of the week. And I think that worked in its favor, at least for the first half of its run, and where you could have these bombshells dropped and then you could kind of go back to fighting Mystery Meat. But with this, we kind of have to keep things moving. So yeah, we brought him back, and he was this suave character in The Ultimate Enemy. We kind of melted a bit of that away in the first book to kind of show he's really just this scared, really sad kid on the inside, no matter how much he tries to hide it. So I thought, like, okay, perfect thing. We're gonna trap him in a kid body, the thing that he's trying to avoid the most and the thing that triggers him the most, and let's see what happens. And I like to think that it makes him a bit more kid-like, whether he wants to admit it or not. It's like him desperately trying to regain this cool factor that is just never gonna happen for him. It's like Fetch, it's never gonna happen. Similar how we have the trio clowning on Vlad, we can have Danielle just kind of clowning on him, which is fun. I thought he would be a cool character to make Danny, Danielle, and Valerie interact with later. They didn't interact much in this second book because of some edits we made. For me, I don't see it as that big of a leap for him to be this kind of a loser kid. That original him is still in there somewhere. It's just very deep down and it's very painful. Body you inhabit likely does have an impact on you, at least like the longer you're in it, which is something I would also like to explore a bit. And also one's like has to wonder how much of the change is just because he's literally talking to other humans. I assumed he didn't really do much of in that other alternate timeline.
It also kind of felt like his story was sort of paying off Vlad's escapades trying to clone Danny, which was always kind of weird, but it kept coming back up in the show. I always found that fascinating with Dark Danny as well, is the fact that he's not just a future Danny. He's like a fusion of two consciousnesses. So in a way, he is his own entity.
Yeah, it's very cool. Like, I mean, the more I think about it, I can just like get really intense about it. You know, the whole philosophy of self. It's just such a wild thing. I like to think two consciousnesses in the same body brain. What could happen? So I like the idea that Vlad was doing all this evil stuff to clone and make this family of his, and then it's like monkey's paw. Okay, you wanted the family, now you get it, and it's the worst version possible. It's this Frankenstein creature that absolutely hates you.
Oh, I think accepting responsibility and taking Dark Danny under his wing is way more interesting than just going to jail. I wanted to ask if the new design in book 2 for Dark Danny is inspired by the clothing in Identity Crisis and Masters of All Time, and if the hair is inspired by the skunk hair in Phantom Planet.
It is, yeah. Okay. Good eye. Yeah.
Did he dress himself, or is this Vlad's doing?
The way I had it in my head was like Vlad tried to dress him in like nice preppy clothes, and then he kind of just dressing in the way that he thinks would upset Vlad the most. Oh my god, I have so many headcanons of like what he's doing, ruining Vlad's life. It's just his time to be like rage and rebellion, but the way like a regular kid does, which is I'm gonna listen to 3 Days Grace really loud on my stereo.
A lot of like the nitpicky logical sides of me when I look at shows, especially ones like Danny Phantom with a lot of lore and history, is like some of the mechanics of his body is just like, oh, can he go ghost now? Or if he was able to fuse with Clockwork but then unfuse with him in A Glitch in Time, can the Vlad and Danny initially that makes up them unfuse? And I'm not sure if any of these will spoiler any future storylines you get, but I guess my question based off of that is how rooted into the future of this version of the character do you have mapped out?
A lot. There was a sale at Office Depot for like these really big whiteboards, and I went absolutely ham, and I like did this whole kind of like what's that Charlie Day meme?
Yeah, I was thinking the Charlie Day meme with the board and the red string.
Yeah, I was back when DX Lopez, who was our lovely editor for the majority of the time, but I just remember like I logged on and I showed it to her. I was like, "What do you think?" He was like, calm down. So I have thoughts. Whether or not be able to do them because we have enough books, or even because would that be like child appropriate content?
I feel like Danny Phantom is one of the pieces of media that could get away with pushing things a little bit further.
Totally.
As long as it's treated within the same like general tone of the show. I mean, like, you know, in the most famous episode, his whole family dies.
Yeah.
Yeah!
It's not even a joke. They're just like, yeah, they died. I've always had this argument where there's like a difference between made for kids and then just family friendly. For example, like the MCU movies, generally most, if not all ages go and see them, but they still have like some deeper, darker themes. So it'd be interesting to see Danny Phantom try to tackle something a little bit more intricate and outside of just the made for kids range with these novels. Is that something you would be able to do in these stories, or what are the perimeters?
So it's interesting you asked that. That was one of the other things that I asked, because I was like, how do we translate TVY7 to us? And publishing is still like the Wild West, especially when it comes to comics and graphic novels. It really varies. And so what you can get away with too is also different. There's a line in the first book where Dark Danny talks about, I put you in the ground before I can do it again. I remember like writing that and being like, okay, so that's going to get edited. And they were like, no, that's fine. And I was like, I didn't push harder in directions that I felt were overly gory or anything like that, but it is definitely something on the mind where, like, yeah, I think we would have definitely more license to explore things that maybe you couldn't do on television.
Is his official name Phantom now? Is that how we should refer to him?
Dog. The amount of trouble I have had with that character's name, oh my gosh, because they never name him in the show. And then finally, it was like a huge back and forth with Abrams and Paramount. And then finally, we were like, Dark Danny. And they let it happen. And I was like, okay. And then Pedanticat, who I did an interview with last year, was like, oh yeah, like that's the name they gave him in the Ultimate Enemy game. And I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe I forgot that. I played that game. On a Doylistic level, we'll refer to him as Dark Danny. In the canon, I tried to lean into the idea that no one really has a name for him, and he does not like to be called Danny. Our Danny got to figure out who he is, so now it's time for him to be given that opportunity. And that's going to come with him choosing a name for himself. But until then, he's Phantom. He's Dark Danny. That annoying guy.
We've also been introduced to an original character with Lyca. Could you tell us a little bit more about the balance of weaving in these new elements to the Danny Phantom lore and continuity, such as Lyca or the Great Divide?
Another rule that I was given a little bit later on in the process of development for the first book was you can't make any new characters. And I was like, that's fine. I mean, this show has plenty to work with. Another reason why the source couldn't be another new character or whatever. So I was like, okay, it's got to be more of a philosophy or like an event. Then with regards to this next book, I also was going in under the impression that, okay, we can't make any new characters. So, and I still wanted to bring Wolf back. Like, we're going to figure this out. And I wanted to go more into his origin story. And we were kind of dancing around it until finally I got a note from Paramount that was like, oh, BTW, you can make a character. Smiley face. Okay. That makes things so much easier and more streamlined for me. I'll just introduce this little girl and like, that'll be the thing that he's trying to protect. I basically wanted to recreate the situation that we had in Destabilize. You have Valerie. She realizes the truth about Vlad, which is already devastating because he was basically one of the only people in her corner. She decides to save Danielle, not because she recognizes her worth as a half ghost, but because Danielle has a bit of human in her. And that's the only reason she was okay with it. And I found that fascinating. But the ghost half is also still a human, like it's like a living thing. You're okay with killing that? Wanted to like explore that with like a wholesome character who everybody loves and would hate to see killed, trying to draw parallels between this kind of father figure entity of like Wolf and Lyca and Damon and Valerie and a little bit of Dark Danny and Danielle. And it's less of a father figure, more of like a friend figure, but this idea that we have parallels here. You get a little bit of backstory, you find out that there are no more wolves. It's him and Lyca. I did want to use that concept of being like, so there are a finite amount of ghosts and it is possible to actually destroy them. And what are the implications of that?
What motivated you to make Tucker say PogChamp? I had to stop because I laughed so hard when I saw that, by the way. It fits, but I just wanted to know.
I had a friend who was saying that ironically, and then she couldn't stop saying it, and then I made fun of her, so I started saying it, and then I started saying it unironically. My thought was, this is literally like the most cringe thing anyone can say. What can Tucker say in this moment to completely nullify the cool strategy that they just did? Pog.
I love the way that you kind of turned Tucker's character on his head a little bit, because he's, I have like a whole montage video I made about Danny Phantom of Tucker just being a problematic bad person. And so having him be able to lean into like cringe a little bit more instead is like a very refreshing way to change his character.
When you watched it in the era that we did, which was again Toonami 2000s, Yasha, where like all the anime at the time also had like the sex pest character.
Yeah.
So like you had to have like someone who's girl crazy / boy crazy. Tucker kind of fit that mold. It's not a trope that I particularly enjoy, and I'm not defending it, but I'm like, if you see it through that lens, then it's like, okay, he's not as annoying when you see what the writers are trying to like, you know, make him kind of fit into.
Well, yeah, because the whole show was everyone was a stereotype, and that was like intentional and a part of how they wrote like all that main cast of human teenagers. But when you're watching an episode and you hear Tucker go, "If you could just give me 5 minutes," you're like, Tucker.
That's the line that always gets me, where I'm just like, okay, you can't really. It definitely seems like you're taking like the best elements from all the characters into these novels. Like it still feels like Tucker, despite you not honing in on like that aspect of his personality, is a testament to the writing. Like you can lose like a little bit of that like early 2000s tropes and unfavorable sides of him, but it can still feel like you're reading Tucker.
He and Sam really were like the angel and devil on his shoulder, which was a fun dynamic for a little bit until they kind of really forced the issue, and then I feel like Sam kind of became a bit more of like a nagging mom. In a way.
They pushed her too far, for sure, in that direction.
Watching the first half of that series, like, she's actually pretty understanding. Like, she does go out on a limb for certain things, like, okay, we're all going vegan. When it came to, what is it, parental bonding, she apologized to Paulina, and she was like, he's my best friend, I was just looking out for him. Like, I feel like there was a lot more nuance. The same for Valerie, too. I remember, like, people were not a fan of Valerie or Valerie x Danny. There was a lot of, like, why is he with her? And, like, she was so mean to Sam. And when I look back, I'm like, no, she wasn't, actually. They were actually pretty mature, all things considered. Sam was like, you know, truce, and Valerie was just so happy to have like the potential of a friend. Let's take the best of that. The big thing that really got me was like Sam was portrayed as this research character, kind of like Willow in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Then I think the last time she actively researches something is, I think, the Fright Night episode. And then after that, I think she's relegated to either blushing around Danny or just kind of screaming Danny from the sidelines. And then suddenly having like kung fu moves. If we're going to rethink of what Tucker's role is, also what Sam's role is in this new timeline.
I do appreciate that you kept them in their relationship too in the new timeline. It's nice to have one little moment in each of the books where it's like, okay, they're still dating. Thank God.
I kind of almost wanted to put more into it, but I also didn't want it to turn it into like a Valerie versus Sam love triangle thing, because I want it to be like Danny needs to face Valerie as a person, as an entity, as like a friend, and I don't want that to be too wrapped up in Sam, but I still wanted Sam and Valerie to kind of acknowledge each other a little bit, because I actually think they have a lot in common that we never really touch on. Fair Game is something that was a lot easier to write than the first one. It all goes to show, like, as much as I love Valerie and I want to give her more of a place in this world, and I do plan on trying to make her more of a main cast character, I'm just glad we got to give her a bit more time. It's fun to draw her being cool and using all her weapons. We get to have her share her emotions and her genuine beef with Danny and Vlad, which I think is valid and should be discussed.
I will say, every single time she puts on her suit, you draw her looking so freaking sick. Fair Game was an all-around great time. We loved how it carried Valerie's story further, the surprise with Dark Danny, and teases that set up the future of Gabby's new era of our favorite ghost getter. You can order the novel now online with the links down below. And in addition, I'd like to plug my own Danny Phantom project titled 5 Years Later, and you can watch it right here on YouTube. And if you'd like to support the series, we're releasing trading cards with hundreds of our original artwork. Pre-orders start in December, so give us a follow to stay in the loop. But until next time, keep it fizzy. Special thanks to Andrew Analik in the ink cartridge tier, and Elizabeth, Susan, and Maps in the ink barrel tier. Your contributions greatly help the future of this channel, and we couldn't do it without you. Thanks.